Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Another beautiful day in South Florida, paradise. And the topic, as you know, that Greg has been posting on Facebook is about the ego. And I think everybody knows the ego in this room. If you don't, get to know the ego, because half the problems in life are based on ego. So, what is ego? Is it good? Is it bad? If you get into the psychoanalyst type thing, that Freud came out and he called it the id, and he blamed it as this crazy thing. But if you go back into the ancient Latin where the word ego came out of, it meant I am. And if you're in the metaphysics, you know what I am is. I am is a part of you that has the seed of the Creator, the source within you. Because the Creator created all things out of itself, herself, itself. So therefore, each and every one of us have a spark of it within itself. People who know me always know that I always say that God is the ocean and humans are a drop of water out of the ocean. The ocean would be the capital O and the human would be the small o. Has all the same qualities. Throw the human back into the ocean, it becomes part of the ocean with all the same qualities, and that's how we were created, out of the Creator itself, and we all have that spark, and we are God with small g's, and the God or source we refer to is the God with the big G. So how did the ego get involved in this thing? I mean, there's the source of all things, the Creator, and then there's us humans and all the other things that exist on the earth, from the animals to the plants and so forth. Where does the ego fit into all this? Well, when a baby is born, I wrote a few things down here, and I always write a whole bunch of things down there, and when it comes to referring it to it, somehow I get lost. I don't even go there. As a baby is born without a sense of self, without a sense of being a separate human being, one could say the baby is born egoless. And when you watch those newborns and they're smiling and they're looking around and they're almost like they have presence, well, a lot of people say they're still connected to the one that created them, and they see the angels, they see the goodness and everything, and you see spirit in its purest form if you look at a small baby. Without an ego, they're quite naturally at one with everything. However, this doesn't last. In the space of a year or two, the child develops a sense of themselves as differentiated human being. One could say that an ego has developed. So we know that we're born and we're egoless. We have nothing. We were just created. We come out of mama's womb with the spirit of the Creator within us, and we're in touch and harmony with everything. The only time we feel is discomfort when we have these new human facilities that act without our control, like we have to pee, we have to do all these other things we want to eat. Then we begin to manifest or develop, and we don't know language yet, so we cry. We're discomfort. But other than that, everything is perfect except our humanness. But as we grow and we learn language, and language is a very complicated thing. And when I say complicated thing, because there's a big difference between language and communication. We can know the word, but yet we don't necessarily communicate, because language is a process of interpretation, and what a word means to me may mean something different to you. So I can say something to you and know what I'm talking about, but you hear something totally different than me. So language can be complicated. So we learn language, and all of a sudden this individual little human being begins to have a sense of self. And that's where in Latin they call it I am, because self is I am, the connection with the great I am within ourselves. But we don't know that. We're developing, we haven't reached that age of reason or maturity. So this ego begins to talk to us, and all of a sudden we believe this ego is God. I mean, it's always there. We got these different voices within our head. And I'm not talking about schizophrenia, I'm talking about the reality of things. We got the thinker, who is me, and then we got this other thing saying something to me, and then all of a sudden I hear something on the other side, and what is all this confusion? Well, what the confusion is pretty basically, I am the thinker, and who do I hear? I hear the ego. And what do I hear somebody else cutting in? I hear pure spirit. And so you got this battle going on all the time. You know, in the Cherokee legend, they talk about this where a brave came back from a battle with the white man, and you know he goes to his grandfather. He says, "Grandfather," he says, "I just feel so torn up within myself. Something is going on." And the grandfather says, "Son, what's going on?" He says, "Our teachings tell us we are one with everything, that we love everything, but yet we go into battle and we kill people, and we massacre them and so forth. What is going on with me? Because I feel so confused and complicated." And this story is not just of the Cherokee breed, it's with us every day. We feel complicated. And the master says, the grandfather says to the brave, he says, "Grandson," he says, "there are two dogs living within you. There's the good dog and there's the bad dog. And the bad dog is always attacking the good dog. And that's where you feel the confusion." And he says, "Grandfather, what's the answer? How do I become free?" And the grandfather, in all his wisdom, says to the grandson, "The dog that you feed the most." That dog, that wild dog that's causing all the problems with us is our ego. Because our ego is something that is growing and manifesting. It's an illusion. The ego is a total illusion. However, its effects are reality. Even though it's an illusion, the effects are the reality. You know, in science, they have all kinds of tests and studies that they have to have so many cases and the results and so forth, and that's how they have scientific things. For years, metaphysics have been healing people, curing people, and science says, well, it just can't happen. But we see the effects over and over again, so we know it's real. So now science has entered a realm of what they call quantum mechanics or quantum physics. And all of a sudden, they're finding out that they don't know. They can't. The case studies are changing from the thinker who's watching it. But they can find out that the results by the effects of what's going on. So we have the effects of the ego. The ego comes and thinks and tells us, "I'm your God. I'm your everything. I'm here to protect you." And then we watch the effects of the ego, and they wind up destroying us. So what do? How does this happen? We got to feed the dog we want to win. We got to feed the good dog or the bad dog. Who are you feeding? Let me read something from Eckhart Tolle, if I can find it here. Everybody here knows Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle says the ego is primarily the cause of man's dysfunction because it craves a special identity, though it can never name what ultimately will create that feeling for us. So it's insatiable. This means that what more often than not drives us is a need to feel our ego's idea of identity. And again, the key word, idea of identity, usually meaning to feel acknowledged by others in life in some particular way. I'm a great housekeeper. I'm a great cook. I'm a great thing. This is all the ego talking. This is why we identify who we believe ourselves to be with our thoughts, material items, and money, and even through our need to be right when others are wrong. We tend to aim at most desired results for the sake of that ego-desired identity rather than our true identity, our I-amness. Only through the conscious awareness of our I-amness can we feel serenity within ourselves. So in other words, we're in competition with every human being. Once we develop language, now we're in competition. We get company coming to our house, we got to make sure everything's in its right place. Because we're worried about what other people would think. When in reality, people don't give a damn. They're too interested in their own ego, what's going on. But as people, we got to do this, we got to do this. What they going to think? What they going to think? So we're in competition with every other human being in the world. That's the ego. We're not in competition, but the ego part, the illusion part of us is. And so therefore, the effects are I'm in stress, I'm worried, I'm concerned what other people would think, oh my God, and I go on, my life is unmanageable. Because my ego is, even though it's an illusion, the effects are real and everything that happened. What does Ernest Holmes have to say about ego? Ernest Holmes, a great human being who caused this new thought movement called religious science. Ernest Holmes said, we are affected by limited human race consciousness. Does everybody here know what race consciousness is? Everybody? Okay, then I'm going to tell you what race consciousness is. It's only going to take a minute, but it's a very important part of living. Race consciousness is the consciousness that the majority of the human beings on earth think, and therefore it manifests in their life. But it can be narrowed down to a country, to an ethnic group, to a culture, to a neighborhood. So let me give you an idea in the neighborhood. You got a beautiful neighborhood. The houses are all everything is the lawns are manicured, and you drive to that neighborhood and you say, hey, what a great place. I'd like to live here. And the reason it's that way is everybody who happens to live in that thing has a consciousness together that creates that neighborhood. But then over a period of time where different people move in and out, the consciousness of the neighborhood changes, and it becomes a little ragged, and as that consciousness again attracts other people until all of a sudden you find a neighborhood that is totally blighted, that everything is falling apart, houses in ill repair. That's race consciousness concept. Then all of a sudden a couple people move in that neighborhood who say, well, I'm going to fix this house up, and I'm going to make this lawn nice and so forth. And then their vibration reaches out and attracts other people that want to do that. And all of a sudden, it hits critical mass. And I'll get into critical mass in a few moments. All of a sudden, it hits critical mass, and the neighborhood changes again and becomes a very desirable place to live. That is race consciousness. That's what Ernest is talking about. So he goes on, we are affected by limited human race consciousness, which is our tendencies of thoughts, beliefs, and actions passed along through generations. The sins of the fathers are passed through the generations. That's exactly what he's talking about, is a race consciousness. You read it in the Bible, the sins of the fathers are passed through the generations. Most people have no idea what that means. We are subjected to the human race consciousness starting at birth and must break away from it to attain our conscious awareness, our true identity, our I amness. Holmes also said consciousness is the inner embodiment of an idea through the recognition of truth in a direct relationship to the divine. That's basically what many spiritual teachers have tried to convey to us. Our true identity is about our relationship with all that is, first and foremost. Embody the relationship and we become aligned with deeper understanding rather than oppose it. And that alignment empowers us in our true identity. So, on what authority can I speak about ego? Well, I can speak on the authority of ego because I've gone through ego. I've lived a life where my life was based on my ego, my wants, my desires, and I've gone through that. And I'm at a point in my life now where I've actually transformed over all those things so I can talk about it. Did I have to go through it? Well, I went through it because I didn't know any better, and I went through it probably for a purpose on life that I can now teach about the ego and talk about my experiences with the ego and how I overcame it and how it doesn't affect me. I'm not saying I don't have an ego. I'm saying it does not affect me to the way it affected me in my past decades of life. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit about race consciousness, how it affects the ego, and how we can overcome it. You heard me mention a little while ago when I was talking about the neighborhood, critical mass. And I'm going to talk about critical mass, and I'm going to give an illustration that was studied by some scientists off the coast of Japan back in the 1970s. And it's called the 100th monkey. And I don't know how many are familiar with the story of the 100th monkey, but I'm going to go through it. There was islands, uninhabited islands off the coast of Japan. And monkeys lived on it. And these monkeys, the only way they fed themselves, sweet potatoes grew wild within these islands. And this particular island, scientists went on and they were monitoring and recording the actions of the monkeys. And what would happen, the monkeys would dig up the sweet potatoes from the ground, and it was sandy ground, and they would shake it and bang it and so forth to get the sand off the sweet potato, because the sand didn't taste too good with the sweet potato. So they wanted to get as much sand off of the sweet potato as possible. So that's how their eating habits were. But the scientists were watching, there were some baby monkeys who were playing, and they were playing with the sweet potato like it was a ball. And they were throwing it back and forth, and the potato landed in water. And they picked it out of the water and started shaking it, and one monkey picked it up and just took a bite out of it. Guess what? No sand. Tastes pretty damn good. So these little monkeys, 3 or 4 of them in that place, start eating these potatoes. They throw it in the water and then eat it. They didn't go through the process. The big monkeys, the adult monkeys, were sitting back watching this, and they couldn't figure it out because from birth they had to shake this sand all off. So they started washing their sweet potatoes or throwing it in the water, and they started eating it. Once they start eating it, then other monkeys seeing it, and then monkey see, monkey do. Other monkeys start eating it, and then it reached to the point of the 100 monkey. This is what 100 monkey is, a symbolic term for critical mass. When it hit that 100 monkey, all of a sudden every monkey on that island start washing their potatoes. But the most interesting part of this critical mass is when the scientists went to the neighboring islands, which they checked out before, the monkeys on those islands were now washing their sweet potatoes, which they never did before. Called critical mass. When you hit a certain critical mass within the race consciousness, everything around it changes and falls in that place. That's a very important aspect when it comes to the ego, and I will correlate it and tell you exactly what I mean by that. They have proved now, when you get enough people praying for a particular thing, it hits critical mass, and that changes. It took place. Since the fall of Russia back in the teens of the 1900s and communism come, people would always talk about praying for Russia. Pray for the conversion of Russia from atheism back into having a creator, a source. And I remember growing up, I was born in, before the Second World War, so I can go back a little bit ways. And people would always talk about pray for the conversion of Russia, especially if you were raised in Orthodox Catholicism like I was. And you know, some people said, yeah, and everything. But by the 1980s, when the nuclear powers and the Cold War started, people started to be threatened by this extinction of the human race, by this atomic power. And more people began to pray for the conversion of Russia. And what happened? It hit critical mass, and the Berlin Wall fell down. And after that, it was a domino effect, and the Soviet Union broke up. You know, not to say that communism is totally gone, but the critical mass was the power behind all that. So I'm just bringing that out to show you how powerful critical mass is. Well, there's something also called critical mass and race consciousness within each and every human being. We all have our own set of things. Do you know that the human being has from 12,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day? That's a lot. If somebody was a slave and had nothing to do but do what the master said, they think about 12,000 thoughts a day because there's nothing to think about. They get up, they have to do a certain menial task and so forth. If you get into people in third world countries where there's nothing, they're born into a particular class of things, their thought and the thoughts of that, there's no escape or nothing, so their thoughts are less. You get to a place like the United States or anywhere in the West where there's free world, people will have anywhere from 50,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Mind-boggling. And even more boggling than that, as the scientists have proved, 70 to 80% of those thoughts are negative. So 70 to 80% of everything we think as human beings is negative. So we want to talk about how can we not transform the ego, but rise above the ego and destroy the illusion completely. We need to hit critical mass within our own thinking. So obviously, if 70 to 80% of our thoughts on a daily basis is negative, the critical mass is already think to negativity applied, and we say, why does this happen to me? I do everything right. I pray. I do everything right. And yet, no matter what happens, this goes wrong. I can walk out of my house in the morning and guaranteed within 5 minutes, everything's going to go bad. My day's going to go bad. My job's going to be bad. My bosses, my co-workers, everybody's angry. I go and my social life is all angry. What am I doing wrong? It's nothing. My head is ready to explode. That monkey mind is in full bloom. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? The critical mass has been playing in all of our lives because we're grown up in a society where we expect the worst. How many people get out of their bed in the morning and say, this is going to be a great day and I expect the best? Well, a lot of people do that for the first 5 minutes. And then it's complaining. You don't understand. If you were me, if you had a boss like me, if you worked for the people I do, if you had co-workers like me, and if all of your friends were out to get me, you know, that's critical mass that's going on. And I know there's a lot of people in this room who can relate to that. So how do we transform that ego, that illusion of the ego, and let the creative part, the divine spark within us take care? Well, If I told you I'd give you 3 easy steps, you'd say 3 easy steps to eliminate 70 to 80% of the $50, $60, $70,000 thoughts that I do with it. But it's really that simple. We need to hit critical mass within our thinking. In other words, we have to take 70 to 80% of our thinking and change it to positive to have critical mass to change in our side ourselves. Ernest Holmes always says, change your thinking, change your universe. That's a theme of Science of Mind. Change your thinking, change your universe. How do we do that? We create critical mass within our thinking. We get it up to 70, 80% of our thinking, and then when the critical mass is positive, all the positive things rush into my life. You know, you see some people that already have that, and you say, he's so lucky, he can step out of his house in the morning, step in shit, and it'll turn to gold. And we've heard about people like that. No matter what they do wrong, it turns to gold. Because they have critical mass within their thinking that everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And a lot of people say everything's going to be okay. It's in God's hand. 5 minutes later, they got another thought saying, oh, God, complain about this, and they cancel all that good stuff in there. So you're going on, that battle between the two dogs is always going on. So how do we do it? Well, I'm going to give you 3 easy steps. And I think everybody in this room has the ability to follow this. The first thing that you do is you stop complaining. I don't care if it's real or not real. First of all, it's not real because it's an illusion. The effects are real. So you're feeling it. You're feeling it in your feelings and your tensions and everything. So the first thing that you have to do is stop complaining. Even if it's your reality, stop complaining. Because the minute you stop complaining, you're in the verge of changing that reality. You're in the verge of changing all the people you are. So the first step that you need to do, instead of complaining, choose love. Remember that newborn baby that I talked about? There was nothing but love, oneness with the universe. So the first thing we have to do is choose love. Yeah, I know how that sounds. You know, it doesn't sound like, what, choose love? Well, what are we talking about? Is it that simple? Give it a chance. In the words of Gabriel Bernstein, a fabulous spiritual and motivational speaker, and I'm going to use her words, not mine, whatever you're afraid of, it's proof that you've turned your back on the love and chose to have faith in the ego. Whatever you believe in, if you believe everybody in your family are jerks, you just created it through your ego. If you believe that the company you work for is dysfunctional and they can't do nothing wrong and they'll never get any better, you just choose the power of your ego. See, in her philosophy, love is the only emotion. No other emotion exists. Love is the only emotion because it's the emotion of the Creator that created you, and so therefore every other emotion that you feel is nothing but an illusion of the ego itself. Fear is an illusion. I know it's heady, hardy stuff, but what helped me the most was this. As soon as you're fearful or anxious thought, tell yourself again, but love did not create this thought, so it is not real. So if you're feeling anything, if you're feeling stress, you're feeling emotion, if it's not love, it's created by your ego, and it's not real. It's an illusion. The effects are real. And then remember, change the difference between the illusion and the effects. It's just like cancer. Cancer has been proven that there's no germ that causes it, but yet it's real. The effect is it's real because your own cells within your own body mutate and work against you. The illusion created it, but the effect is real. Anybody that says that cancer is not real themselves. Cancer is real, but it wasn't caused by a germ. It was caused by an illusion of the ego to destroy yourself. Not that a person does that on purpose. I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm saying people are going around giving themselves cancer. But they are, but they're not doing it intentionally. Even if you can't quite get on board on the love train, don't worry about it. Just start telling yourself, if love did not create it, it's not real. That's all you have to say. Whenever you feel anything that is not feeling good to you, just say, if love did not create it, love can't create anything that's not harmonious, then you'll get in touch with it. That's one way to begin to change part of those thoughts. And if you keep it that simple and talk about love, you know how many negative thoughts fall by the side of those 70,000, 80,000 thoughts to 70%? If you choose love and say this is not real because love did not create it, you've just canceled out a whole bunch of negative thoughts. That's the first step. The second step is never complain, no matter how bad it is. Complaining keeps us locked in negativity. I mean, think about it. Who wants to hang out with somebody who complains all the time? Nobody. So why complain even to yourself? This is the source from which self-disgust, self-hatred, self-sabotage springs. And the ego loves it. This is self-imposed separation. You've now separated yourself from your true heart. You've separated yourself from love. If it's not love, it's not real. So why complain about it? And instead of change your thinking, change the critical mass within your mind. Julia Hoyle, another wise woman and spiritual teacher, said the following: if we are able to maintain the practice of not complaining, the results are profound. When we complain, what we are doing is telling a story to ourselves in our minds, and then verbally telling others about our personal response to what is taking place in our lives. The story centers on how events affect me. In an instant, we are able to see that we have brought into the validity of our thoughts and opinions what we want to broadcast them. Poor me. It's happening to me. I can't help it. I'm a victim. I'm a victim. And even though you may not think you're a victim, you're creating yourself as a victim. Instead of complaining, send love. Know that everything within that circle is nothing but the love of God, and the seed of God is now working within it. And no matter what the appearance is, the illusion, if I see everybody and hold them in love, that whole situation changes. But you got to hold it. You can't wait a few more minutes, another thought come in and cancel that out. Critical mass. Keep thinking it. Even if you can't see it, you think it. You will see it. And again, but if you don't get it, don't worry. This is all you have to know. Just stop complaining. Try it for a week. See what happens. Try it for 1 week and see what happens in the situation. You might be a little surprised. See how your life opens up for you. If you need more motivation, start a complaining fund. Every time you complain, I want you to put $1 in a basket. Every complaint that comes out of your mouth, put $1 in your basket. Your own greed will stop your complaining. And each time you start complaining, just keep dropping that money. The ego always wants to improve on our current moment. Don't let it draw you down. In other words, if you're in that role of being a victim, even though you may not feel like a victim, one complaint leads to another complaint, and next thing, you can't even stand yourself. You don't want to get out of bed. And the third step, if all else fails, it's hard to be down and out when you're feeling grateful. Don't ever forget grateful, because next to love, grateful is the most important feeling. There's only 2 feelings in the universe that have any reality to them that are not based in illusion: love and gratitude. And gratitude is beyond even what love can describe. It's beyond agape. And agape is that unconditional love of the universe itself. And if you mix gratitude and love together, you have agape. It's hard to be down and out while you are feeling grateful. You may try the above suggestions to find that you begin to get angry. You will get angry if you follow those 3 steps, because I'm going to tell you, your ego does not want to stop you and let you be free. And as you begin to stop complaining and you begin all these things, you will feel this anger within yourself and say, but you don't understand. If you were me, you would be like this. You feel yourself up. Anger will pop up. But remember, love and gratitude are the only 2 things in the earth that are real. Everything else is illusion. That anger will begin to subside. This is the ego defending itself. It's throwing up any obstacles in your path. Its main goal, remember, to maintain. The ego will fight. It's hard to die. Right now on this planet Earth, we see the ego kicking itself up in our race consciousness of the planet. We see all this thing with the terrorists in the Middle East and all that. What that is the ego of the Middle Ages is beginning to die, and its last struggle is to uprise and terrorism and try to conquer people. But that ego is dying, and we will see in a decade or 2 that this world will completely change. We see that stuff, we say, why is God letting this happen? God has nothing to do with it. It's the race consciousness.